Hello, and welcome to Merryspring Nature Center's Tuesday Talks. I'm John Fromer, your host and the program director. Today's talk is generously sponsored by Camden River House, Camden National Bank, and Rennie's Maine Adventure. Merryspring is open every day of the year, dawn to dusk, free of charge. And you can visit Merryspring online anytime at merryspring.org on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Merryspring's mission is to practice, teach, and advocate sound principles of ecology, conservation, and horticulture in order to protect our natural environment and to provide natural landscapes and cultivated areas for public enjoyment. There are many benefits to being a member of Merryspring Nature Center, including free admission to our spring, summer, and winter lecture series, 10% discount on most purchases, a share of the stewardship, and reciprocating privileges to more than 345 gardens nationwide. Merryspring is a 501c3 nonprofit organization primarily funded through memberships, grants, and donations. You can donate securely online at merryspring.org. You can give us a call with your credit card at 207-236-2239 or mail your check made out to Merryspring Nature Center and send it to P.O. Box 893, Camden, Maine 04843, and we thank you. This program was previously recorded on Tuesday, April 15th, entitled About Dahlias, presented by John Fromer of Merryspring Nature Center. Previously recorded Tuesday talks uploaded to Merryspring's YouTube channel are generously sponsored by the Cascade Foundation. This is a program all about dahlias, possibly more than you want to know, but it's good to know options and things like that. And so we're going to talk about what dahlias are, colors, and how to use them in the garden. There's several different types of flowers and groupings, how to grow them, how to propagate them, what to look out for, and how to store them over the winter, because dahlias are very tender. Now, I believe it's full, but and we may run this in future years, but in conjunction with Dooryard Farm, we have a 4-part dahlia program, and Dooryard Farm bought Endless Summers dahlias, and you see them on the way out to the Snow Bowl, blooming in September, and they're just gorgeous. So anyway, that's a program that we have, and I just wanted to bring your attention to it. So what is a dahlia? Well, a dahlia is in the aster family. It used to be the composite family. And so there's a central disc with petals that run around the center, and each of those petals and each part of the center are in fact a botanical flower. They're a complete flower, and that's why it was in the composite family, and they just rolled all those into the aster family. They are tubers. They came from Mexico and out in the scrubland. They're very similar to potatoes, and in fact there's a sweet tuber that you can grow, which they think may have help in regulating type 2 diabetes. It's a good kind of sugar. They're going to be late summer into fall, all the way up till frost. Some are small, they're window box type dahlias or for a container, and some get 5 or maybe possibly 5.5 feet tall. The big dinner plate dahlias can have a flower a foot across. They're really pretty impressive. And they were used as food for the Aztecs in the 1500s. So there's 14 different groups that the Royal Historical Society recognizes, and they're grouped by their flower types. I'm going to show you each of those. And again, they are not hardy. They will not survive the winters in Maine. And so you do need to lift them, and I will show you how to do that. Okay that they get hit by one light frost, maybe down to 32 degrees, but after that, they do definitely need to come out of the ground. So there are dahlias that are basically all colors. I think they're working on a very dark colored dahlia, not black exactly, but probably pretty close in the very dark purple colors. Some have multiple colors, and some have variegated foliage. So green and white, and or sort of a creamy yellow, creamy green. But not all the flowers in all the different groups. So you've got some choices that you can make, either between height or when they bloom, and or certainly colors. So they will fit in all parts of the garden, front, middle, and back. And remember, you can bring the back of the garden into the middle, and the middle of the garden into the front. And you can even have an island dahlia garden all by itself. Of course, it won't bloom until the end of the summer, but when it does bloom, it will probably be showstopper. And they're great to plant with annuals and perennials. And one of the nice things in your garden design is that you can change which dahlias that you plant in with your annuals and perennials. And so you can change up your garden year to year. Typically, you can grow them in a row in the vegetable gardens, just simply for cut flowers. And certainly if you want to win the blue ribbon at the fair, you're going to want to have them not in a garden, because you're going to have basically one stem and one bud per plant, and you might have 2 or 3 plants just to make sure it works out. And that will put all of the energy into one bud. And if you're growing the dinner plate dahlias, that's how you win the blue ribbon. Small dahlias are great for window boxes, and again, coming from Mexico, they're able to take some dry conditions. So if your window box is in the sun and it dries out during the day, you'll probably be okay. They're rather drought tolerant, but not like we're going away for 2 weeks and not going to water the dahlias. That won't work. But they do make excellent cut flowers. They last a very long time. They will shatter a little bit, so they can be messy, but they are really wonderful as a cut flower, very easy to grow. So the giant class is 10 inches and over, so those would be the dinner plates. And then you can see the different sizes of flowers, and the pom-poms are really, less than 2 inches. So those are pretty small, and most likely are going to be in the window box category. But there are ball dahlias that sort of look like a pom-pom, and those can be maybe 3 inches across. So these are single flowered dahlias, and so each of the petals and each of the part of the disc are a botanical flower. And so those are pollinator friendly, in that there is no obstruction for an insect to get into your dahlias. This type of dahlia would not have issues with earwigs. However, this one would. And so this is an anemone flower dahlia. And when you have dahlias or other plants, chrysanthemums, and there are some echinacea as well that look like this, that are incredibly double, even though each of those petals is a botanical flower, it makes it that much harder for a pollinator to get in and reach the nectar and the pollen. So if you're growing a pollinator garden, these would not be, this class, group 2, would not be the ones that you would be using. But they are quite interesting, and you get a lot of different variations in them. This group is sort of in between the collarette dahlias, and they're pretty good size. And again, you have a central disc with a little bit of a double petal in there, and it would not be an issue for pollinators. And if you notice, if you look at the central part of the disc here, you can see, my mouse will go over there. There we go. So you can see that, like a sunflower, the disc is going to ripen or mature from the outside in. And if you look at that pattern of the disc, that's a Fibonacci sequence, and it's very similar to other plants such as sunflowers or daisies. So that spiral there, it's multiple spirals if you look at it closely. So that's rather interesting from a mathematical standpoint. Water lily dahlias, by the way, the English say dahlia and we say dahlia. You're welcome to use both. But if you go to a garden center and say dahlia, they might look at you sideways. The water lily dahlias are really probably the most attractive dahlias, and that's, my opinion, and everyone else has theirs, and that's great. But they seem to be the most popular, or at least the ones that have the most varieties that are available. Let's maybe come at it from that standpoint. And they're extremely attractive and available in multiple colors. The cactus dahlias, this one was one of our wedding flowers from 92, and it's still available today. It's really quite attractive, and so one of the issues is with this particular type where the petals are tubular. Those are great hiding places for earwigs, and that is one of the problems with dahlias. It's sort of like ants on peonies. Dahlias have can get earwigs. Haven't seen them in a number of years, but doesn't mean they're not out there. And decorative dahlias, these can be large as well, and double, but not double, crazy double like the one I showed you, the second slide. Beautiful, again, many color varieties on this particular kind. Very popular. The ball dahlias are a lot of fun, and they're great to arrange with other shapes of flowers, particularly things that have a flat disc. So it'll change your arrangement up a little bit. And pom-pom are similar to the ball dahlias, but smaller. And again, pollinators might have some sort of an issue. So to increase your stock, you certainly can purchase tubers, and we may have some at our plant sale. And you can purchase plants that have already been started. Now, I saw a few of the different nurseries that they had dinner plate dahlias. So the flowers were open. They were about 10 inches in diameter. They were showstoppers for sure. Transporting those could be really quite interesting. You wouldn't want them to break. There's a significant amount of weight at the top of that stem. So a tip might be that if you were to purchase one of those and it had a couple of blooms on it, particularly any that are open, you might cut those and put them in a damp paper towel and a Ziploc and take them home as a cut flower, so the weight of the flower doesn't break the stem. Because if the stem breaks, your plant will have to pick up that distance from wherever it broke. And if it broke all the way down or quite a ways down at, I don't know, $40 or $50 a copy, you might not be happy. So that might be a tip, just to cut off any heavy blooms, but leave the buds. And you can grow dahlias from seed. It's very easy. They germinate in 3 or 4 days. And you can divide existing tubers, and you can root the shoots. Sort of like if you have a potato that has a bunch of extra shoots after storage for the winter, you can root those shoots if you want. So many of the local garden centers will carry, if not tubers, they will carry started plants. They've been trucked up from Florida and Georgia and places like that. You might find them, as I mentioned, at various plant sales. Pardon me. Several catalogs and the internet carry them, and maybe your friends have some they'd like to share. The quality of the stock is the most important thing. And so in many cases, if you go to the store and you're buying tubers, you may be able to examine the bag of tubers if it's clear. If it's a green bag, that's kind of a problem. And you might gently squeeze the bag just a little bit to make sure that the tubers haven't rotted, and also to make sure that the shoots in there aren't 6 or 8 inches long and have wrapped around each other and would otherwise break and just be difficult to work with. So quality is absolutely critical. And you also, if you're buying the plants that have previously been started, you might look and make sure that there's no disease such as powdery mildew or insects such as aphids on the plants, and make sure that you get the best plant that you can. And remember, if your dahlias are a hybrid, saving the seeds will return one of the parents, but you likely, pretty certainly, will not return what you started with. So I went to the store and I bought a package of dahlias, and they looked pretty, and it looked like there was a few different kinds. Fortunately, the bag had a clear back to it, so you can see the shoots that are coming off of the tubers. Now, these tubers are very small compared to what they used to sell in the 80s, and also what you might end up digging up. So if you start dahlias from a division or from a seed, you're likely going to dig up a small tuber in the fall. However, I had a class on dahlias a few years ago, and somebody brought in a dahlia. It was the size of a basketball, and it was tubers all the way around. It was a sphere. I'd never seen anything like it. And she wanted me to break that up into smaller pieces because she was concerned about how she might do it. And so that was really something. But as you grow your dahlia collection, and year after year, and if they're in conditions that they like, the root ball that you do dig up in the fall can be quite large. And I don't want to say it's a problem to store, but it might take up a lot of space. But if you can examine the bag, particularly if it's clear, and try and find shoots that are small, like you can see over here on the right, those are going to be a lot easier to work with than these ones that might break when you take them out of the bag. So dahlias from seed, again, very easy to grow. They were hard to find, tall, large dahlias over the years, but now they seem to be in local garden centers, and also at, I believe, Pine Tree Seeds has them, and that's a Maine seed company. I didn't check the other two Maine seed companies, Johnny's and Fedco, but you could. But I believe Pine Tree has at least one example of seeds, and they're very similar to a zinnia, and they go maybe 1/8 of an inch under the soil, probably no deeper than 1/4, and you lightly cover them, so 1/8 of an inch would work, and keep them warm. Remember, they're from Mexico, so 65 to 70 degrees in a well-lit window would work. They are, as I mentioned, drought resistant, so you don't want to soak them or the seeds will rot, but keep them moist. And this is a good time to start dahlias, and they really do germinate in a short order. 3 or 4 days, I think, is really what I've seen, but I put in 5 to 20 because that's what the package says. So the goal would be to raise tubers that you will store over the winter. Now, the potential for dahlias to flower from seed in the first year is good, but they might not get to be 5 feet tall, even though that's what the package says, because it's going to take a number of years for the tubers to develop enough energy to provide a plant that can grow that tall. And people don't necessarily consider this, but the tuber you plant is not the tuber you take up in the fall. So the tuber you plant is for the sole purpose of getting the stems started and generating foliage until the plant is large enough that can do photosynthesis, at which point that tuber will shrivel up and new tubers will be developed. And that's what you dig up. So here's some dahlia seeds that are emerging from the soil, and I'm using ProMix here. There's the two kinds of ProMix. There's the organic and the commercial ProMix. The organic ProMix does not have a wetting agent, and so it can take up to a day for that soil to absorb moisture, to be at the appropriate humidity for seed starting. But the ProMix with the wetting agent, which is commercial grade, will absorb moisture within a couple of hours. So if you want to use the organic ProMix, just plan the day before or several days before to hydrate your soil. So they'll come up out of the ground, and they are a dicot and have two seed leaves right here. So these are the two halves of the seed that you plant. And the first thing that happens when you plant a seed is the seed will put down a taproot, and that is for the purpose of taking up additional moisture, not as much at this stage in the way of nutrients, although it will absorb some nutrients from the pro-mix, and pro-mix does not have any fertilizer, and you don't want fertilizer when you're planting seeds because these baby roots can't handle that at all. And the very fine roots that you might see with a magnifying glass last about a day. And so it's important that you plant the seed at the appropriate depth, because this stem length will work only when you plant the dahlia seeds at about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch to come up out of the ground. If you plant them too deep, then that stem isn't long enough, and it will only emerge, let's say, this far out of the soil, and that's not good enough, and it will not make it. And if you plant them too shallow, the taproot will push the whole seed right out of the ground, and if it's out in the sun and the soil is dry, that will desiccate the root system, and that will be a problem. So I typically use a spray bottle or a mister to spray the seeds with moisture and not pour out of a glass or a watering can that could change the depth of the soil. But after a few days, this is what you'll see. And then they will grow. So after a month, I've got a couple of buds here. Now, you'll notice that I've taken a cutting out of the middle of this dahlia. And so we'll talk about that. And so here's an example of a tuber that came out of that bag that I showed you. And here's a very short shoot right here. And this side is maybe 5 inches long. And so what you want to do is you want to remove the tuber from the bag very carefully and find any viable shoots. And if you've saved your tubers, you might be able to break them apart. You certainly would, you could do that in the fall when you dig them up, or you could do that in the spring. And what you have to have are these eyes. Now in the fall, it's not going to look like a shoot like this. It's just going to be like an eye on a potato. And they would be central to the actual cluster of the different tubers. And these tubers basically contain carbohydrates for the purpose of getting these shoots up out of the ground so they can do photosynthesis. And if any of them are broken or damaged or rotted, and that's shoots and tubers, you want to remove those and plant them right away. Now, rooting the shoots is really quite easy. And on the window box tubers, you want to have, well, you can have as many shoots as you want because they're only going to grow about 8 or 10 inches tall. And it's not going to be a demand on the base of the plant to contain and securely hold up those stems. But on a 5-foot dahlia, 1 to 2 shoots maximum, for 2 reasons. One, the tuber can't support more than that in the early stages of growth. And secondly, those shoots can get very heavy, and they can, if not properly staked, can blow in the wind, and it would damage the base of the tuber, and then you would get disease promoting rot in the tuber. And when you go to dig it up in the fall, it might not be wonderful. So very easy to do. So the first thing you do is hydrate soil and put it in a container, in this case a 6-pack, make a little furrow for where the shoot's going to go in. You can skip the furrow if you want. You can plunge the stem right in there. Here I have a tuber, and it's got more stems on it, shoots that I would like. And so I'm going to remove a couple of those shoots right at the base, not up here, but right at the base. And if any of the material that attaches the shoot to the tuber base comes with it, all the better, because there's something called undifferentiated cells at that base. And so those cells, when dipped into the rooting powder, which we'll get to, will turn into roots. So you can cut them off, or you can carefully pinch them off, and sort of a tearing, pulling kind of a fashion. And that should get some of those cells. So those cells, the undifferentiated, would be like right there. And we can even do it with a tall one, but the short ones are going to work out a little bit better. It's less cells that need to be inflated, and there's no root system. So if the smaller ones don't have to take up as much water as quickly, and so they'll likely survive better, but you can try it with the larger ones. And so this is a rooting powder, and it's a hormone. And the reason that you can root plants in the spring is that plants are in growth mode in the spring, and the rooting hormone will react with those stems, the shoots, where they wouldn't later in the summer and fall, because at that point the plants are done growing and they're in flowering and seed production mode, and the growth hormones drop off dramatically. But at this time, the growth hormones are very high, and what we're doing is we're just augmenting that to turn those undifferentiated cells into roots. And so I've got a little damp paper towel here, and the rooting hormone is a white powder like flour. And you just dip the tip of the stem in the rooting hormone. It doesn't have to be a lot. And then you can either put it into the furrow that you made, or you can simply plunge it right into the rooting medium. Some people use sand. I use ProMix. It seems to work in either case. Here's that tall one down here, and it's leaning over, and it worked out, but I prefer the shorter ones. So then you want to press the soil in around the shoot to make sure that it's good contact, so that moisture will be at the exterior of the shoot. Keep them warm, water them in so that the soil does in fact get all the way around. And if it's in a really sunny area, you may use a little bit of shade. They can take full sun. You could put them into a Ziploc bag and hold the humidity in that case, or you can mist them with a very fine mist, and the moisture will enter into the shoot through the foliage that's being developed, and possibly the stems, but most certainly the foliage. And then once they've developed some sort of a root system, you can transplant them up into a pot. And so how do you tell whether there's a root system there? Well, there are two ways. If there's no root system, it's probably going to turn brown, fall over, and rot. If there is a root system, and you very carefully, after let's say a week to 2 weeks, very carefully lift on the stem, pick up on the stem. If there's any kind of resistance, there's a root there. And then just leave it alone and let it put out some foliage and get a little bit bigger. And then you can transplant it into a larger container. It's going to have to sit in a container for quite some time, probably a month at least, in order for that root system to develop. And remember, our goal is just to grow a tuber that we can lift in the fall and replant next year. So we're not terribly excited about getting it into the garden too early. Remember, it's a baby and it's very tender, so that having it in a container for at least a month to maybe 6 weeks would not be out of the realm. So the first thing it's going to do is generate some foliage, so it can start doing photosynthesis to support root growth, and it's going to focus on root growth and then increase its foliage mass so that the whole snowball gets going. Now, if you'd saved a tuber or you purchased a tuber and you want to plant it, the red line here is how deep you would plant the tuber in the ground or in a container, for example. And so I always leave a little bit of the stem when I dig them up in the fall, so that I know which end is up. And also when I'm storing them, I store them in the upright position because I've had them with the shoot wrapping around the bottom of the tuber and coming up the other side, and that's not a good plan. So basically you want to prepare a hole to plant the tuber in, and I would loosen additional garden soil around your planting hole in case you've got heavy clay, which is part of Maine, and add any soil amendments that your soil test indicates. Not too much nitrogen. So don't go like really high on compost or manure or other sources of nitrogen, because what you'll end up with is a giant dahlia plant, depending on the classification of it, and not a lot of flowers. And we're growing flowers mostly in this case. And so you'd plant it to that level and maybe put some mulch over the top, maybe an inch. That helps to keep the weeds down. It will keep the moisture in and also help warm the soil. And you can plant dahlias in the ground, in raised beds, or in containers as well. And so basically care and feeding. Remember, whether you've saved them or purchased tubers, that 1 to 2 shoots per plant, unless it's a window box size, and then you can have all you want. Your choice of whether you would like to root those shoots or not. Pretty easy to do, interesting to do with kids. You don't need to wear protective equipment per se, but probably some sort of a glove would be good, and definitely wash your hands after working with the rooting hormone. It's not toxic, but I think they do indicate that on the bottle. Dahlias need to be planted in full sun. If they're in the shade, they probably won't reach their height and also will lean into the sun. So full sun is at least 6 hours of direct sunlight, not filtered through trees or anything like that, but at least 6 hours of direct full sunlight. And you want to make sure that the nighttime temperatures are above 65 degrees. So they don't go out terribly early. Now would be a terrible time to plant dahlias. They won't make it. If you wanted to, you can plant dahlias even the large ones, in a window box, provided they fit, and leave 5 or 6 inches on the end of the window box. And you could do that now and have them in a greenhouse or a well-lit, warm, sunny location inside, and you leave that 5 or 6 inches on the end so that you can get your hand in there and lift them up from the bottom after they've grown, let's say, a foot tall or so, and then plant them out in the garden. So that'll give you some extra time, and your dahlias may bloom a little bit earlier, but they're really responsive to decrease in sunlight as the summer goes along. So even if you start them in January, you'd have to keep them very warm, and they might flower. That's how they do it when they ship them up from Florida and Georgia, for example. But for us, we're looking for 65 degrees. Tall varieties do need to be staked. Make sure that you do not stake through the clump. And remember, I mentioned the beach ball size. That would be very easy to do. So you might put the stake in first and then plant the tuber next to the stake. That works rather well. You can, in fact, grow dahlias under black plastic mulch, and the organic standard for black plastic mulch is 1 millimeter, and that will keep the moisture in, keep the weeds down, and warm the soil. And dahlias do respond well to that. If you don't get black plastic mulch, you could take a black trash bag and cut it so it folds open, and put that on top of the soil and bury all of the edges of the plastic, remembering to take it up in the fall. They get fed regularly, again, not with a high nitrogen source, so it might be like a 2-1-2 kind of a fertilizer. They do like organic matter, but they also like the soil to drain. So make sure that you do mix in some compost, which is not particularly strong as far as a fertilizer standpoint, but is great for the soil. They're from Mexico, out in the scrub, so medium moisture. If it's a wet summer, you may get powdery mildew, but also the tubers may rot. And so in that case, if we thought it was going to be a wet summer, I might think about perhaps planting them in a raised bed or possibly containers. And I mentioned the different insects that could be a problem, and you could look for changes in leaf color with respect to them needing feeding. So if the dark green foliage changes to a light green, it's pretty much a sign that they need to be fed. And if any of the plants do get powdery mildew or other potential diseases that I guess they could get, they need to be removed. If you open the bag and it's moldy that you bought, take it back to the store. It won't work out. And so I'm going to talk about diseases a little bit more. And the tubers do rot from time to time. They get very soft and kind of jello-like. And so that's a pretty good indication. And if it's just one tuber, you can cut that one tuber off of the whole clump, and the other should be okay. Some people will dust the tubers in the fall before storage with an antifungal powder, and that may help. I've not done that, and I've not really had an issue, and we are going to talk about storing them. And all through the season, watch for diseases and changes to leaf color. If it's supposed to be a 5-foot tall plant and it's 3 feet tall, that could be an indication, and maybe you want to take a look in the soil. Perhaps worms have bored into the tubers and they've eaten the carbohydrates, and that could also be a problem. So various things that can be a problem: earwigs, caterpillars, thrips, slugs and snails. Basically, you can treat with either a slug bait, hand picking, same with snails, or you can crush up eggshells into not a powder, but just before a powder. So they want to be very well crunched up, and put those right around the soil surface where you planted your tubers, right up against the shoot that is coming up out of the ground. You could use diatomaceous earth as well. And between the diatomaceous earth and the eggshells, both of those are incredibly sharp razor blades if you're a snail or a slug, and they won't cross it. So you want to have maybe a 2-inch or 3-inch kind of a ring of either eggshells or the diatomaceous earth around your dahlia shoots. And if it rains, that will get sort of pounded into the ground, and so you want to reapply after that. Spider mites can be another problem as well. So you're looking for chewing under the leaves, and at night you might go out and find things that don't like to be out during the day. That would be snails and slugs. And hand picking works very well. So dahlias in the garden, this goes back to about 93 or thereabouts, and we have different sizes of dahlias and pretty good concentration in this particular part of the bed. So it's mostly dahlias, as I mentioned, at Dahlia Island, and this would be late August and into September. And there's some decorative and some ball dahlias in there. Now, one of the things I didn't talk about is, what do you do when the dahlias, when the flowers start to go by? And the answer is you deadhead them. So you're going to remove any of the flowers that have been pollinated. And what will happen is that the dahlia will realize that you have removed that bloom, because its whole point is to make seeds, and it will, at the next node down, create another shoot off of that node with another bud, and it will keep going. So the more you deadhead your dahlias, the more flowers you will have. And it's pretty easy to do, and you can just watch for some of the petals to start to fall out of the center of the dahlia. And that's a good cue. The more you deadhead, the faster you will get reblooms. You can see on the right, the white dahlias were not staked up and they fell over, and that was a bit of a problem for the mower and the weed whacker and things. But you know, it is what it is. Here are the ones that we used in our wedding, the red and white ones. And so they work beautifully in the garden. This is from the 80s over on Islesboro. And these are much smaller single dahlias in with some anemone. So those would make good cut flowers for a table, but not like a great big arrangement. But these cactus ones, you could cut that way down here and do a great big tall arrangement, and maybe this bud and maybe that bud would open, but probably not that bud. So when this flower goes by, you're going to cut it back to here, which is where the node is. This bud will take over, and you'll eventually get some additional shoots coming off of there. These dahlias were in an area that did get late afternoon shade, but they're on the sunny edge, and so they did reasonably well, perhaps not as tall. And then these dahlias were grown, that's the black plastic mulch, 1 millimeter thick, each has their own stake, and the purpose of those was purely for cut flowers and not ornamental at all. You could use a tomato hoop to at least start them, and that might help. Eventually, if they're very tall dahlias, you would want to put in a stake as well. Now, one of the things to think about is that if you keep growing dahlias from seed and dividing tubers and rooting shoots, all of a sudden you have about 100, 150 dahlias. And so it's great to do, but all of a sudden you end up with all these dahlias. So lifting and storage, really quite easy to do. Now, you don't have to dig your dahlias if you don't want them for the following year. If you do want them, it's okay that they get one light frost, and that will set the foliage. It'll turn brown and not look great, but it won't kill the plant. But it will signal to the plant that it's time to go into dormancy. So if you dig them, let's say you're going back you're leaving for the winter and you're leaving earlier than your dahlias have been hit by a frost, you certainly can dig them up and store them. However, if they get hit by a frost, you'll likely have better results, and they might not try and send up a new shoot while they're in storage. So the first thing I want to do is I want to cut the stems about 1 inch above the top of the tuber or top of the soil, because I want the foliage to be out of the way. And I might consider cutting any other foliage that is near the dahlias, because I'm going to need some room to get in under them and to lift them. And some of the ends of the tubers will send off a root, and some of those roots can go out 8 to 10 inches, so they could be under other plants as well. So keep in mind about that. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to lift the tuber, you're going to gently shake off the soil. You might consider washing those. Some people will dip them in a 10% bleach solution, which is the organic standard. So 1 part bleach to 9 parts water. Inspect them for rot or any disease. Little round clear eggs would be snail or slug eggs that want to overwinter with you, or any insects or earthworms, for example. Anything that is not completely healthy needs to go. Allow them to dry overnight in a frost-free environment, and then store them in damp wood shavings in a cardboard box that has some ventilation. And the shavings would be things you'd use for like a gerbil container. So here I've got some dahlias that were grown from seed, and they got hit by a little bit of a frost. So you can see that some of the foliage has turned brown, not all of it. So it was a light frost, and that will signal to the plant that it's time for dormancy. Here's a little bit closer of a look, and you can see the flowers got hit pretty hard. They are tender. And so here at this point, I've cut the top of the dahlia off. And this is what's remaining in the ground, so I can see what I'm working with. I'm going to pull the black plastic back and to lift them. So I'm going to use a spading fork, and I'm going to, you could do a couple things. You could, with your hand, not with a trowel or anything, you could dig around with your hand and sort of figure out where the tuber is. And then once you've got enough experience, then you can do this way. But what we're going to do is we're going to go around that clump all the way, and we're going to loosen the soil before lifting it. So we want to loosen all the soil out to about a foot on the large 5-foot tall dahlias. And once we've done that, we can either use the spading fork to get under them and pry them up. Now, if you start to hear any tearing noises, the soil is not loose, and you're losing those tubers which contain the carbohydrates for next year. So listen for that. It's okay. Doesn't matter if the ground is wet or dry. And then at this point, you want to get in underneath with your hands, pull some of the soil away, and lift them. And you pick them up. You don't pry them out of the ground. You lift them out of the ground. So here's our dahlia that we worked on, and it still has stems that are larger than or longer than an inch, and I'll eventually cut them down. But at this point, it makes it easy to handle the dahlia, and I don't really want to handle it by holding onto the tubers in case I break a tuber. If I break a stem, I'm not that worried about it. And so we'll inspect the tuber, and I found one that had some rot and cut it in half so you can see. And so for dividing them before we get to storage, here's a tuber, and it has multiple stems on it, and this is in the fall. So all of these tubers here that you see are what were generated over the summer and not what was planted. That all shriveled up and went away. You might see evidence of it, but it's usually sort of a brown paper wrapper looking thing. And so here I've cut the stems back a little further so I can see what's going on. And right in here, it will easily break apart. Now, sometimes when you do break them apart, there'll be pieces. And if you see an eye, that's okay. If there's no eye, then it won't grow. So here's an example of an eye, and those are next year's shoots. And there's even a couple of more over here. And then to dry them, we just dry them in our greenhouse. It's, shut the door, close the windows kind of a thing. If it's going to be really cold, I might put some heat in there. But otherwise, I just want them to dry out. We're going to shake some of the soil off. I don't generally wash them, but I get them to this point where they're relatively dry. It's okay if there's a little soil that goes along with them, but you want the roots to basically desiccate, not the tubers, but the roots that are connected to the tubers. You want those to dry up because that will definitely put the plant into dormancy, and it will last from, let's say, October through May. Much beyond that, hard to say. You may have good luck or not. And so in this particular case, what I've done is I've got, before I go into the storage boxes, I've divided the dahlias up into different classes, small, medium, and large, so that when I take them out in the spring, I know what they're supposed to do. Because remember, even the large dahlias that you grow from seed will have small tubers. So real small tubers like this would be what you would see first year from seed, not great big ones like this. You might get those, but for the most part, it's not going to be incredibly impressive, but that's what we're doing. So here's our cardboard box, and we ventilated it a little bit. I might even add some more holes going up. Step one is to add some dry shavings, maybe 2 inches down at the bottom. And then we're going to put layers of dahlias in. And here I've added some wood because I've got the different classes. And as I was carrying them, they might shift. And these medium ones might get into the small ones, and I don't want that. So separate containers would work just fine too. And so put the dahlias in layers on the shavings with the stems pointing up as best you can. You can spread them out or not. It's not going to really matter. And maybe a final inspection, and then add a couple of inches of shavings on top. And as you go through, you may wish to moisten the shavings about every 2 layers. So take a pitcher of warm water and pour water. It can be rather damp, but not wringing wet, but rather damp. Sand would work as well, but sand is very, very heavy and hard to deal with after the fact. And remember, these have to be frost-free, maybe at about 50 degrees during the winter. So a big box of sand is going to be hard to deal with, harder than shavings. And of course, the shavings can go out onto the compost pile too. And so in this particular case, I've used a Sharpie and I've just marked, okay, we're done with the medium ones. And above this level here, they're going to be small so that in the spring when I take them out, I know what they are. You can put sticks in, for example. I use tags here, and because otherwise you'd have no idea. You go all the way up to the top, keep going layer after layer and adding water. And maybe the top layer has 4 or 5 inches of shavings on the top and one last addition of water. Close it up and keep it dark. Maybe 50 degrees would be great. Not too much colder and certainly not warmer. So somewhere in the, let's say 45 to 55 degrees would be about right. Tuesday Talks. For more information, please visit merryspring.org. We hope you'll consider supporting Merryspring. You can donate securely at merryspring.org. Give the office a call at 207-236-2239 or mail your check to Merryspring Nature Center, P.O. Box 893, Camden, Maine 04843, and make your check payable to Merryspring Nature Center. Thank you, and we hope to see you again.